Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Miami Total Football Radio, the show. A punctual Miami Total Football Radio, the show, otherwise known as Miami Total Football Radio, the show. I am Franco Panizo, your usual co-host and your only co-host on this first of what should be several episodes this week. Yes, if you are just coming to the news, I plan to have a show, I would like to say every evening, every night between today, Monday, and Friday, the day before Inter Miami hosts its first MLS Cup Final against the Vancouver Whitecaps. That is the tentative plan. We still don't have a full MLS Cup Final week schedule, so it is subject to change, but the initial plan is to do one of these every night between now and game time. Obviously, there'll be shorter episodes, probably in the 40 to 50 minute range, which, hey, maybe is something you guys like better. But that is the initial plan. So we'll talk about the news with each day as the final gets closer. Talk about all different things around the game, the state of Inter Miami, of course, tickets, which we will talk about. I know it's been a hot topic, especially in the last 24 to 48 hours. We'll talk about all of that. The idea is to have the other co-hosts in some way, shape, or form throughout the week, the faces and the voices you're familiar with, to get their takes, at least on one show before the final. Ideally, I would like to have all of us in on one at some point. We might have a Spanish show on Wednesday or Thursday. So if you're bilingual, it'll work out. If you're not, then you might want to skip that one. Boss Daddy says there's a dual stream goofy thing on YouTube. And yeah, I need to sort that out. I think they've done StreamYard, which is the hosting service here, has integrated. It's called Mars, which is like multiple. I don't know. I was watching a video before this started, and they essentially are trying to optimize the streams. So now there's horizontal ones like you're seeing now, but also vertical ones, I guess, for people that are watching on social media apps that are friendlier to vertical videos. I think I have figured out how to prevent that. It's now just a matter of getting the muscle memory down and remembering to click those buttons before I hit publish on the stream. So work in progress. Also want to apologize for those of you that just listen and don't watch, because I know there was some IT issues last week with the podcast going up on SoundCloud, which impacted the ability to reach some of you on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, those of you that listen to the podcast. So I know the show didn't come out till Friday or Saturday, which was obviously very late in the week, especially since we had filmed the Sunday prior. So kind of defeated the whole purpose of doing it early for those of you that just listen. So apologies on that, but that one was out of my control. We'll do better. We'll do better this week. We're going to have a lot of shows, a lot of content, starting, of course, with Inter Miami reaching the MLS Cup Final. Inter Miami will host the Vancouver Whitecaps in a doozy of a rematch from the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal showdown from earlier in the year. Both teams are very much different today than they were back in the spring, but the storylines write themselves. It will be a hell of a match. We'll talk about that as the week goes on. We'll touch on it a little bit here. But this show will be primarily focused on Inter Miami's passage to the final with a 5-1 victory against New York City FC this past weekend at Chase Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on Saturday night. Again, we will talk about the tickets ordeal. I know it's impacting and affecting a lot of you, and not necessarily in a positive way. So, of course, we will touch on that as well. But again, we have so many episodes this week that we'll be able to dive deeper into topics once I have some of my co-hosts with me, or dive deeper. that is to say. But all the same, Inter Miami with another full 4-goal victory, a convincing and resounding win, a thumping of NYCFC this past weekend in the Eastern Conference Final. Inter Miami is firing on all cylinders and looking very, very good heading into the final. Tadeo Allende with a hat-trick performance. He was the star of the show, which I don't think many people would have predicted beforehand, myself included. If I would have said there's going to be a star Argentine, or there's going to be an Argentine that is the star of this match, I mean, everybody probably points to the 10, right? That makes sense. But Allende was the man of the match with his hat trick performance. Lionel Messi had an assist. By his standards, a relatively quiet night, but that speaks volumes to the state of the team. That if Messi had a relatively quiet night, they were still able to win. They were still able to win big. So, no solamente ganaron, golearon, which is a sign of a healthy Inter Miami, in my opinion. We'll take a quick look at some of the sights after the game from field level off in the, what would that be? The northwest corner field level, where we were standing because the post-game interviews were done a bit differently this time. So again, for those of you that listen or sound only, this might not appeal to you for the next 46 or so seconds, but giving you some sights as to how the celebration with the confetti and Lionel Messi holding the trophy alongside his teammates, how that looked from the field level. I'm sure you guys got better footage on the Apple broadcast, but different vantage point just to bring you different sights and sounds of how it all went down. So there you have it. I don't know if it looked as blurry for you guys there while I watched it now as well as it did for you guys. I don't know if it was that blurry, but didn't look that blurry to me on the phone or anywhere else. But all the same, you can see Inter Miami was festive this past Saturday after the 5-1 mauling of New York City FC. I know how this is going to sound. I know how I'm going to come off, but I am not a huge fan of the conference championship confetti and the trophy and the celebration. Like, it's definitely something to to commend, to reach the MLS Cup Final. You're a finalist for the big trophy, the big MLS hardware, the one that will give you the star above the crest. And I know it's a tradition, but in my opinion, I think it's a tradition worth doing away with. It just feels too much like it comes off as you have won a championship, and you haven't yet. Yes, you've won the Eastern Conference Championship, but it's not a real final, right? It is a semifinal in, the real sense of the word. Again, something, Inter Miami deserves all the credit to get to the final, especially with how they've been playing. But to me, in MLS in general, could probably do away with it. Team should celebrate it, enjoy it with the fans, especially if you play at home. But as Jorge Mas said during his on-field interview, one more to go. One more to go. That's the big one. If you lose the final this weekend, the Eastern Conference Championship or the Western Conference Championship, celebrating it is just a footnote. So again, I know it's U.S. culture. but this is one thing that probably we could do away with. As for the game itself, Inter Miami in that 4-3-3, no Luis Suarez yet again. Chelo Weigand got the start over a recovering Ian Frey. That was maybe the slight surprise. Although there weren't very many surprises, it was essentially the same starting lineup that we've been seeing in the recent games. Rocco Rios Novo in goal, Chelo Weigand at right back, Maximiliano Falcon and Noah Allen, your two center backs, Jordi Alba, the left fullback. Three midfielders were Rodrigo de Paul, Sergio Busquets, and Baltasar Rodriguez. Up top on the wings, you had Tadeo Allende and Matteo Silvetti flanking Lionel Messi, who played as a false nine once again. And Inter Miami, by and large, looked solid in all of its lines. The game was 2-1 at halftime. And there was a moment in the second half, a very specific punctual play, una jugada puntual, where New York City FC could have tied it. The cross comes in from the left, finds an open man at the far post. He tries to place his shot into the top far corner, so that would be the top left corner. Rocco Rios Novo makes a hell of a save, probably the only big save he had to make in this game. His number was called, and he reacted and responded accordingly, kept Inter Miami ahead. They get the 3-1 goal moments later, seconds later. Messi with the assist to Matteo Silvetti, who was wide open. Messi draws attention of, I think, 5 NYCFC players. Silvetti's wide open in the box, clinical with his effort. 3-1, that gives Inter Miami some breathing room, los desahoga, and from there they just cruise. But even though this game was tight, it started out with Inter Miami looking very, very good, jumping out to a 2-0 lead with some very direct play. Different type of play than what we've been used to seeing from Inter Miami. First goal is a very long ball hit over the top from Sergio Busquets to Tadeo Allende. Now, the defender, New York City FC's defender, doesn't play it particularly well. Kind of lets it bounce and isn't too decisive in how he wants to clear it. That allows Tadeo Allende to pounce on a bouncing ball, but he takes his opportunity well and finishes to the near post with a rifled effort. Tiro fuerte, tiro duro. The second goal, Jordi Alba with a deep cross, finds Tadeo Allende just inside the 18-yard box, a few yards inside the 18-yard box. And with a fantastic header, Tadeo Allende soars into the air and flicks the ball into the back of the net. 2 great goals for Tadeo Allende, who, if I'm not mistaken, has 8 in this postseason. He is the top goal scorer for Inter Miami in the playoffs, which I don't think anybody had on their bingo cards coming into the playoffs, but clearly he has found his groove at the perfect time. I don't think that the formation change, that this happening in the formation change is a coincidence. I think it has freed him up to do some of the better things that he can do. And he's also gotten a lot of confidence from it. So let's listen to Tadeo Allende talking about bouncing back from the inconsistencies that plagued him over the course of 2025. This good run of form at the most important and the most decisive part of the year.
Y bueno, a ver, después de todo eso uno tiene recompensa, si bien no es momentánea, pero llegó en el momento justo. La mejor manera de ir terminando el año, todavía queda uno más, es otra oportunidad para reivindicar y para afianzarlo más, así que estoy muy feliz por mi desempeño, pero también mucho más feliz por el desempeño del equipo.
Y el nivel de confianza es tremendo, ¿no?
Sí, sí,
no
sí.
falla
Ni hablar,
ninguno.
ni hablar, ni hablar. Estoy con la confianza muy alta.
Tadeo Allende talking about how his confidence is very high, that uh, eventually you get your reward for the hard work you put in. Obviously, he went through some struggles this year. We all know it. But right now he's making good on all that's being asked of him, pretty much. Now he did miss a chance in this game to get a hat trick much earlier than he did. He has a great header, a great look. Sorry, not a great header, a great look for a header in the second half. A goal that could have given Inter Miami some breathing room, some earlier insurance, and he glances it wide of the right post. It was probably it was definitely easier than the previous header that he had scored on in this game. He missed it. It cost him momentarily his hat trick. But he gets it in the end, scores late on off of a feed from, I think it was Yannick Bright. Was down on the field at that point because, again, we had to prepare to do the interviews down there. So we had to leave the press box a little bit earlier. And he caps his hat trick. He completes the hat trick performance. I asked him about that after the game, if it was important for him to score a hat trick. This is a very quick soundbite, but an important one. So let's listen here.
¿Fue importante ese meter el hat-trick para ti?
Sí, importantísimo. Mi primer hat-trick en toda mi carrera profesional.
Ah, sí, bueno, felicidades.
Gracias, Tadeo.
So for those of you that don't speak Spanish, don't understand Spanish, he said it was very important for him to get the hat trick. It is the first hat trick of his professional career. So that's huge for him going into Saturday's final, because you're going to have Tadeo Allende that's buzzing, that's flying. He's on great goal scoring run. And on top of that, he accomplished a hat trick. If he had finished the night with a brace, not converted a third one, especially after that miss with the glancing header, maybe he has a little bit of a bitter taste. Even though everything's mostly positive, there's probably still a bitter taste as a competitor. Now the question after this weekend for Inter Miami, and I pose it to you, is do you bring Tadeo Allende back in 2026? Right now he's on loan. Whether he returns or not is up in the air if Inter Miami decides to buy him again or strike another deal. But right now, Tadeo Allende is on loan. Given the totality of his body of work for Inter Miami this year, do you bring him back in 2026? He's on loan from Celta de Vigo. Do you bring him back to be a starter in 2026? Or do you think the inconsistencies that he has shown throughout the year are not something to ignore, and that Inter Miami should maybe look elsewhere for reinforcements? It's a question for the offseason, but something to start pondering now. Because clearly we're seeing the best version of Tadeo Allende, but we've also seen not so good versions of Tadeo Allende. Missing chances that he should put away, costly moments. He always puts in an effort. He always hustles. His ability to stretch the back line with speed is something Inter Miami barely had earlier this year. He was essentially the only option that could do that. Clearly one of his strengths. Some of his better goals have come in that fashion, especially the one against Palmeiras, if I'm not mistaken, at the Club World Cup. So you've seen his strengths, you've seen his weaknesses. Does his total body of work convince you that he should be back next year? We'll see how he does on Saturday, but certainly a player to keep an eye on against the Vancouver Whitecaps. The rest of the team in this one, the defense, again, pretty airtight. The goal they give up, they could have done better on. Matteo Silvetti partly to blame, leaves everybody on side on a free kick, and then Justin Hack wide open for a header. Other than that, and again, the play for Rocco Rios Novo, defense didn't give up a whole lot. And that is market improvement from where they were even a month ago, or just over a month ago. Defense is benefiting greatly, of course, from the new 4-3-3 with more energetic legs, more ability to compete for 50-50s in the midfield. Rodrigo De Paul has had his role simplified, and that has allowed him to play to his strengths. So, a lot of good things for Inter Miami collectively. El funcionamiento del equipo está en un buen nivel. The collective functioning as a group is working very well right now. Let's listen to Mascherano on the game itself.
Pero bueno, creo que sabíamos que iba a ser difícil. De hecho, fíjate si habrá sido difícil que prácticamente Nueva York no nos generó situaciones y sobre todo hasta el minuto 60 y pico estuvo en partido. Cuando nosotros lo estábamos haciendo muy bien, pero bueno, una falta, un centro lateral y siempre esa sensación de que es un equipo peligroso.
So he talks about New York City FC being in the game despite the fact that they didn't generate a whole lot from the run of play and in the attack. But they were in the game until the 65th minute. And they were. It always still felt nervy for Inter Miami up until that third goal from Matteo Silvetti. Third goal of the game for Inter Miami. That is something that Inter Miami will need to be better at if the opportunity presents itself on Saturday. Because if you're up 2-0, you have the opportunity to put the game away. You got to do so. You've got to kill the game, end any hope for your opponent. Make it 3-0 if you have the opportunity. Don't give the opposing team any chance or any belief that they can come back into it. NYCFC got a goal almost out of nothing, and that allowed them to be within striking distance. Had they been a little cleaner, they could have tied it. Would they have been good enough on the night to beat Inter Miami? I doubt it, but the game completely changes. Confidences change. Everything changes had they gotten that 2-2. They didn't, and Inter Miami ultimately cruises to the finish line and blow it wide open for the, again, third consecutive 4-goal win. Jose Ba 195 in the comment section says, Inter, go, last step, difficult match. Let's play the way we know how. Humility and head. 3 bicep emojis. I think he means humility and cabeza, or like, smart game is what I'm assuming Jose is going for there. And I do want to talk about Lionel Messi in this game. And this is not a criticism of Lionel Messi, but he wasn't at his highest level in this match. Yes, he drew a lot of attention. Yes, he got involved in moments. Yes, he had the assist on the third goal, which Inter Miami needed. But he wasn't at his best. This wasn't a game where if you were rating him on a scale of 1 to 10, you would say he was at 8, 9, or 10 points. No estaba 8, 9 o 10 puntos. Doesn't mean he played poorly, but he wasn't at the high level he's normally at. I asked Javier Mascherano about what it says with this state of the current team, that even though Messi wasn't at his highest level, that this team could not only win, but win big. And again, it wasn't a criticism. It might have been received by Mascherano as I was trying to be critical of Messi for not having a great game, but I wasn't. And I asked him the question, and I said it like this in Spanish. What does it say about how healthy the state of the team is from a soccer standpoint, that even when he doesn't have a massive night where he has to be the difference maker, the team wins and wins big? Because to me, that is a sign of improvement That is a huge step forward. And that to me makes Inter Miami the big favorites going into Saturday. Because in the past, we have seen for Inter Miami to compete in a lot of the more competitive, more decisive games, Messi more often than not has had to put the team on his back. We've seen it with Inter Miami. We've seen it at other times, at other stops in his career. I mean, Messi dependencia or Messi dependence, it's not something new. We've seen it at different stops throughout his career. And of course, when you have a player of his caliber and of his quality and of his skill and of his level and his know-how, I mean, how could you not? But there's been times where he hasn't been able to do it. He's had an off night, hasn't been his amazing magical self, which happens to players. But nobody else has stepped up around him. So the expectation normally in these decisive games is Messi has to practically do it all. If he doesn't, Inter Miami has little to no chance. Well, that's no longer the case. We're seeing an Inter Miami. We saw an Inter Miami this past Saturday that without Messi getting on the score sheet and with delivering what was, albeit an important assist, was a pretty simple assist. Even still, Inter Miami routed New York City FC. They beat them big time. And they have found other ways as a team to cause damage to the opponent. Again, the two first goals are from very direct play, Busquets and Jordi Alba, who will play the final game of their careers this weekend against the Vancouver Whitecaps. Both from long balls. Tadeo Allende stretching the back line and being clinical. That's different than what we've seen from Inter Miami for much of this year. So for me, if you have a team that can play well, create chances, and take them without needing Messi to be overly involved, that speaks wonders to where you are heading into the final. Because we know what Messi can do, right? We know Messi can take a game by the scruff of the neck, and with his individual magic, his ability to filter passes, filtrar pelotas, shoot from distance, free kicks, we know he can do it. Now, if you have a team around him, players surrounding him that are also better equipped to help him to win games, to not rely only or solely or mostly on him, that makes you a very dangerous team. I think Inter Miami is the heavy favorite on Saturday. I will talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps later in the matchup itself. I do want you to listen to the exchange with Mascherano. Again, he might have taken it as a criticism. His response, my interpretation of it is interesting, which I'll share afterwards. But let's listen to Mascherano's response to my question about the state of the team, because it takes him a while to get to the point of agreeing that, yes, everyone needed to take a step forward, and now there's a better team around Messi. And it wouldn't be fair to rely mostly on him or solely on him to win games. But at first, he starts really by defending the number 10's performance, talking about his pressing ability, talking about the high expectations that we have for Messi because of the alien-like rendimiento, the alien-like performance levels he has delivered consistently for so long, where he is the difference maker with multiple goals, assists, etc. But here we go. Let's listen to Mascherano's remark, and we'll pick up from there. Hemos visto otras cosas
No
del
lo
equipo.
conseguiría, pero bueno.
Bueno, hoy una asistencia de los 5 goles. O sea,
Y parece anormal, ¿no? Un día que da una asistencia parece anormal. Cuando había hecho los 12, había participado en los 12 goles anteriores.
Bueno, pero no directamente como suele hacer, como lo hemos visto. ¿Qué tan bien habla eso de qué tan sano está el equipo futbolísticamente? Que Messi no está 8, 9, 10 partidos donde es la figura decisiva, el equipo igual no solamente gana, golea.
Bueno, creo que te vuelvo a repetir. Al final Leo nos ha acostumbrado a lo extraordinario. Y porque es alguien extraordinario, es alguien que nunca más vamos a volver a ver, o por lo menos es lo que creo yo. Eh, y creo que vengo insistiendo muchísimo, inclusive lo insisto cuando en los últimos, digamos, en los otros partidos, ¿no? En los últimos 4 partidos, venía insistiendo de la importancia de Leo sin pelota. Es el primero que lidera la presión, el primero que nos muestra el camino. Eh, ha estado generando un desgaste en estos últimos partidos increíble. Y porque lo otro con pelota ya sabemos lo que es, la capacidad que tiene. Y, y es verdad, hoy quizás nos asombra que no ha podido convertir, pero nos termina dando la tranquilidad en el tercer gol con una asistencia que él solamente puede ver y, y prácticamente cerrando el partido. El resto, sí, claramente. Él solo, por más que es el mejor de la historia, si lo dejamos solo, sería muy injusto pretender que él termine ganando siempre los partidos. Y bienvenido sea que el resto acompañe y creo que todo el mundo ha dado un paso adelante. De eso se trata. Para poder competir a este nivel, todo el mundo tiene que dar un paso adelante. Los jugadores lo han entendido y teniendo la carta ganadora como la que tenemos nosotros, es todo mucho más fácil.
That concludes the press conference.
So I pretty much paraphrased most of what he said before the soundbite, before the video clip. He does say when other players are performing, stepping up, and surrounding Messi like they are, makes everything that much easier, especially with la carta ganadora that they have, which would translate to the winning, I guess, the winning run. The literal translation would be winning card, but winning way, the winning form that they're on. Inter Miami's in good shape. My early prediction here as a Monday, and I'm sure I will repeat this throughout the week on all the other episodes. Inter Miami will be MLS Cup champion come this Saturday. I think the season will end with the coronation. There will be a party in South Florida this weekend. Inter Miami, I think, will get their first star. I just don't see. That's not true. It's not that I don't see. I just think it's going to be very hard for the Vancouver Whitecaps to beat this version of Inter Miami. That's not to say it's impossible. There are ways to do it. There are ways to do it, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. But I did want to touch on something that Mascherano mentions there, because he says he doesn't agree with the statement that maybe the team is becoming less Messi dependent. And he talks about how Messi was involved in all, I think he says, of all the goals prior to this match against New York City FC. I think it's 12 goals or so, something along those lines is what he said, if my memory serves me correctly, that he directly or indirectly played a part in. But if you go back to the last game against against Cincinnati, if you go to the most recent game, Inter Miami's 4-0 victory over FC Cincinnati, Messi has a goal in that game. He also misses 2 very good chances in that game. And they were largely forgotten about. It didn't really matter. They were just secondary, tertiary thoughts in that match. In other games, if Messi had missed the chances that he missed, that would have come back to haunt Inter Miami, because they've needed Messi to be on point, to be clinical, to be unforgiving, perdone. And in that game, they were afterthoughts, because that's how good Inter Miami was collectively against FC Cincinnati. And he was more of an assist man in that game against FC Cincinnati. Here, again, has an assist, but by and large wasn't the overly influential Messi that we've seen. Now, you can tell me, I know his fans will come in here and say, oh, he draws a lot of attention, jala marca, and that's all true. But Messi, we expect him to score goals and put assists. When he doesn't, that's not the norm, right? That's not the norm. Normally he's scoring and assisting. And this one he gets an assist, but only 1 out of the 5. Not the norm. Not the norm. But that's not to say I'm criticizing Messi, just to make that clear. I'm just saying how good shape Inter Miami is in today. Switching gears to this weekend. Inter Miami will welcome the Vancouver Whitecaps on Saturday afternoon at Chase Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. First MLS Cup Final Inter Miami will be in, and it will be at home. Now, it took, 6 seasons? If I'm not mistaken, yes, correct. This is the 6th season. It's a huge game for Inter Miami, the most important of its existence to date. This will help outline and define Messi's stay with the team for however many years it ends up lasting. This will define part of his stay in MLS. This will define the part of the closing chapter of his legendary career. So it's a big game with a lot at stake. Now, one thing that we're going to touch on here, that I'm going to touch on here, that I think needs to be addressed, corrected, fine-tuned. Doesn't have to be changed completely, but it does have to be altered. Un ajuste. And that's Inter Miami's penchant for its habit for getting into heated verbal exchanges, skirmishes, scuffles. Because while it's maybe true that Inter Miami walks that fine line to try to get under the opponent's skin, to rattle them and make them lose focus, as was the case for NYCFC this past weekend. There's a big coming together. Starts with Maximiliano Morales and Rodrigo de Paul. Messi gets involved and is fuming at Maxi Morales, his compatriot. And they have a heated exchange, and Messi just keeps following him around the field to continue to chirp. At some point, although it would take a very ballsy referee, at some point you run the risk of getting an unnecessary red card, if not a yellow card that limits you the rest of the way, right? Because if you're on a yellow card, then you can't go into certain challenges. You won't make certain plays for fear of getting a red, for fear of leaving your men or your team with 10 men. Mascherano, during the whole ordeal against NYCFC, was pretty passive. Just kind of sat on the sideline. Didn't really try to calm his team down. It was almost as if he was a passenger or a passerby, just on looking and just letting it sort itself out. I would have liked to see him take better control of the moment, try to get his players to focus again. I would have liked to see the referee do that as well. I get to an extent doing it to get under the opposition's skin. Again, Inter Miami scores a goal shortly thereafter that makes it 2-0. NYCFC's coach said that his team was naive in terms of what he saw from them at certain points. I imagine that was one of the moments where he probably saw some naivety from them. Thiago Martins, the NYCFC defender, he said that they knew to expect that they shouldn't have fallen for it, essentially. But that's who Inter Miami is. And it's hard to deny that at this point. They're definitely a team that tries to rattle you, that tries to play the mind games, tries to get you to perder los papeles. It's clear that that's one characteristic of this Inter Miami team. Maybe you could say they adopted that from Mascherano. You know, they say teams take on the personality of their coaches. Mascherano was no saint on the field. So maybe it's one of his characteristics. Maybe it's something, you know, clearly he's not super concerned about, but you would like to hope that they slightly fine-tune that going into the final. Again, it would take huge guts to suspend anyone on Inter Miami, especially the bigger name players, let alone in any game, but especially a final. But you don't want to run that risk. And maybe Inter Miami knows that psychologically le va a costar a árbitros. It's going to be tough for any referee to make that call because of how much attention it would draw, and they know, they understand that psyche. So maybe they push the envelope, they push the boundary, they push the line because they know they can get away with it. But it also does create an image where you're sore winners, right? It does create that image. And then maybe at the end of the day, look, if you win the MLS Cup, you don't really give two craps. You know, you see Rodrigo de Paul do a lot of the same stuff with Argentina, you know, defending Messi, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe at the end of the day, if you win, that's all that really matters to you. But you could probably do a little bit better. Hacker-JZ6MM says it's part of football. Mind games with foot games. Yeah, 100%. 100%. They definitely play the mind games. Absolutely. They definitely use that to their advantage. And that's part of having jerarquía. That's part of having know-how, working the refs, working the game. No team in MLS really has el peso. No other MLS team has the weight or the reputation, or has the I'm trying to find the word in English. They just don't have the ability to pull off the same demeanor or approach. So Inter Miami can take advantage of that. They have for much of the year. But again, don't want to risk an unnecessary yellow or red. All it takes is one bad refereeing decision. It could be a stupid decision. It could be a controversial decision, but all it takes is one decision. All the same, again, it would take a brave referee or a very foolish referee. But all the same. Anyway, going to the Vancouver Whitecaps game this weekend, Inter Miami faces one of the best teams in MLS all year, a team that beat Inter Miami soundly over two legs in the CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals earlier this year in the spring. A team that is capable of beating Inter Miami on Saturday. It is capable. The Canadian side has the counterattacking qualities that can cause Inter Miami's backline problems. But this is my early take, my early opinion, my early analysis. I don't know if it'll change much over the course of the next few days. If there was one team that I think could beat Inter Miami in the MLS Cup Final at home at Chase Stadium, it's probably this Vancouver Whitecaps this season. But in order for this version of the Vancouver Whitecaps with Thomas Muller, with Thomas Muller in the lineup, they're going to need to be deadly and almost perfect in their attacking transitions. And they're going to need to be ruthless and clinical with the chances they have. Anything less than that, I don't see any other way they beat Inter Miami. Because Inter Miami, with the way it's playing, with the role players stepping up, with Messi still having the ability to be Messi, I just don't see any other way for Vancouver. So they have to be those two things. They've got to be at their top level to have any chance to beat Inter Miami with the form that Inter Miami is in. I fully expect that not to be the case. I think Inter Miami has enough alternative options to score and inflict damage that they will outscore Vancouver when all is said and done. And Inter Miami, I think, will be crowned champions. But it will be a very interesting game. You know, how will the stars perform? How will Messi perform? How will Thomas Müller perform? You can talk about the role players on Vancouver. Sebastian Berhalter has been big this year. He's worked his way into the U.S. men's national team picture. Brian White, on the other end, has shown to be a very clinical number 9. But even still, on paper, just pound for pound, player for player, Inter Miami, on paper, is the better team. And then when you look at the run of form heading into this game, Inter Miami's also collectively on an incredible run. I would even almost say probably unprecedented in MLS history. I don't have that in front of me to say with 100% conviction, but I highly doubt any other team in Major League Soccer history has won 3 games in a row by 4 goals going into MLS Cup. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but I doubt it's happened. Let's listen to Mascherano talk about the Cup and the crowd this coming Saturday because, again, Inter Miami will be at home. They will have the home field advantage. They'll have La Familia and the crowd behind them. At least that's what we think, because there's been a whole bunch of ticket uproar. But let's listen to Mascherano and then we'll come back to round out the show.
Los últimos 2 meses han sido impresionantes, pero el gran mérito es de ellos, de haberse convencido de hacia dónde queríamos ir, de haberse fortalecido como grupo. Y hemos llegado al final de la temporada con un equipo con una hermandad dentro del equipo, que todo el mundo tira para adelante, que no importa los que inician, sino que somos realmente un grupo y el poder de un grupo es inquebrantable. Puede superar un montón de cosas. Seguiremos por esta línea esta semana, tratando de seguir inculcando que ese es el camino y que, bueno, que estamos a las vísperas de jugar el partido que soñábamos a principio de temporada, el último partido de la temporada, la final, en nuestra casa, con nuestra gente. Posiblemente será el último partido de MLS en este estadio. Así que ojalá que la gente venga a apoyarnos como nos vino a apoyar hoy, porque con ellos también somos más fuertes.
So this is some information to share with you guys, kind of piggybacking on the end of what he says there, where he says, and he pauses and he thinks about it. He says, this might be the last MLS game at this stadium, at this venue, talking about Chase Stadium, of course. And that's because from what I've heard is that obviously Inter Miami plans to open its MLS home stretch of the schedule at Miami Freedom Park in, Miami. But there are tentative plans for Inter Miami to play next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup matches at Chase Stadium. So this Saturday might be the last MLS match at Chase Stadium, but it might not be Inter Miami's last game at Chase Stadium. Expect them to start their CONCACAF Champions Cup run next year in the Fort Lauderdale venue. That's kind of what he's alluding to, but I had heard that in the days leading up to this past Saturday's game. So not quite done yet at Chase Stadium. But in MLS terms, MLS play, regular season, postseason, yeah, this Saturday will probably mark the last time they play in Fort Lauderdale. At least for now. You never know what the future could hold. You never know. You never know. I've seen a lot of things happen in MLS, even with teams that own their stadiums, and there's all types of things. But anyway, he talks about the crowd being as amped up and behind the team as they were in this Eastern Conference final. And of course, while I do expect this upcoming Saturday's match to be largely in favor of Inter Miami, one thing that of course has come into the conversation is tickets. And a lot of the hardcore, diehard, long-standing day one Inter Miami fans being upset about how the ticket selling is being handled by Inter Miami. Because Inter Miami did not take the approach of offering season ticket holders their respective designated seats for MLS Cup. They took the approach of offering the option to buy tickets to Inter Miami, or the first option to buy tickets to Inter Miami season ticket holders, but not necessarily in their normal seats. You might buy tickets somewhere else because your seat might be taken, might be more expensive. Now, there's a lot of things that go into this. I know, again, for Inter Miami, this is their first MLS Cup. For a lot of people, they might not be familiar with the details. MLS Cup is run predominantly by MLS, right? So even though the game's at Inter Miami's home venue, MLS is the one that runs operations. Inter Miami gives a helping hand. It has some influence. But this is largely done by MLS in terms of how the game is hosted. And of course, this being the final, MLS has corporate partners. It has executives from New York City. It has a lot of people that it needs to get seats for. And they're not going to give them crappy seats. So if you're used to sitting at midfield or close to midfield, just as an example, well, it's going to cost you a pretty penny, or a prettier penny than usual, because there's going to be less seats for you there, because MLS has to fulfill their corporate obligations and get certain people their seats in nice areas. Now, Inter Miami did have the option, as have other teams in the past, of still giving season ticket holders their designated spots. Still a decision that Inter Miami could have opted in for. And they've chosen not to. Which, once again, is a sign during this Messi era that, unfortunately, Inter Miami is not looking out for the best interest of their fans, which is a shame. But clearly, when you opt for the decision to bypass the ability to keep your seats, you are prioritizing profits, because you're prioritizing more expensive seats. And look, I'm not an economics major, nor am I an expert. But obviously, when Messi's in the final, there's a lot of interest. People are going to be willing to pay a very pretty penny for a lot of these seats. And Inter Miami feels it can make a lot of money not giving you guys your seats, which is unfortunate, because you guys have been loyal fans, right? If you're the season ticket holders, you're especially loyal because you're paying your hard-earned money, not for one game, not for two games. You're paying for an entire season. It's unfortunate that you don't get your seats, It's unfortunate that tickets are very expensive, though it's understandable. It is unfortunate that Inter Miami has opted for this way. Because while MLS can still designate seats and everything it has for its corporate sponsors, Inter Miami still has the option to choose. They've clearly chosen profits over fans. It's not the first time we've seen Inter Miami not do right by its fans. You know, we saw it at the Club World Cup in the first game where there was no designated section, and I know there was a lot of finger pointing there, but Inter Miami didn't do right by its fans. This is not the first time. But it is a characteristic of a quality that Inter Miami has had. I don't know, maybe quality is not the right word. An attribute, or I guess just a characteristic that Inter Miami has had in this Messi era. Profits are a big deal to them, right? They clearly want to make as much money as possible. I could understand if this rubs you the wrong way. I could understand if this makes you not want to renew your season tickets. I understand if this makes you reconsider, I won't say your fandom, but reconsider your passion and how much you really want to dedicate to this team. I completely understand all of that. This isn't the best way for Inter Miami. This is a short-sighted vision, and I do think it hurts them in the long run. They might get money right now that they might not get otherwise, but longer term, clearly they're thinking that most of you will get over it. Clearly they're thinking that if Inter Miami lifts MLS Cup and Messi stays on for a few more years, as he's expected to, that you'll get over it and the page will be turned. Jose Martinez says, season ticket holder since inaugural season, paid $1,000 for tickets to the final. Not my every week seats. This Saturday will be my last Inter Miami game. Jose, I'm not saying that your feelings are wrong. I'm not saying you're not going to stick to your word. But clearly Inter Miami thinks you're either just, you and fans like you are operating currently from an emotional state, and that once they win MLS Cup and once there's new buzz, you'll be back. You'll be back next year. And if you're not, then somebody else will be, because there's so much buzz around Messi. Longer term, we'll see how this works out for them. You know, the days that Messi's not here anymore to put butts in seats, we'll see how much of the core audience, the core fan base, is still chomping at the bit for Inter Miami tickets. I'm not surprised that Inter Miami for Miami Freedom Park has asked for 3-year agreements for some tickets, especially for the more expensive tickets. They want to make sure y'all don't go anywhere. I agree with this is not a good look, not the right way to do it. But alas, this is what Inter Miami has decided. It should make you think about things, right? It should make you feel some type of way. You could understand economics, you can understand revenue, you can understand all that, but you also are a loyal fan, and you should be treated with a level of respect that makes you feel appreciated. And this, I understand why it can make you feel unappreciated. But we'll see. What the atmosphere is like this weekend. Surely it will be festive. Surely it will be rowdy. It was rowdier and more pink this past weekend. There were towels that were given out for the fans. There was pink smoke before the game. It'll be a whole show prior to kickoff on Saturday. Some of the stadium will just be MLS executives, MLS employees. I can tell you that from years of experience covering MLS and MLS Cups. I've covered, I think, 10. This will be my 11th, if I'm not mistaken. But the vibe should be pro Inter Miami. Very much so. Very much so. And it should help, hopefully for Inter Miami's sake, push them on to an MLS Cup win. But we will leave it there. I've gone longer than I said. I said 40 to 50 minutes, and I've gone an hour and 1+ minutes here. We will be back tomorrow. Not sure which co-host it'll be. Not sure if it'll be Ajicita, Andrea Llanes. I'm not sure if it'll be Jose Armando, a.k.a. Island Jose, a.k.a. Cinco. I don't know if it'll be Ao Alonso, a.k.a. El Búho Alonso Contreras, Simon Evans, also known as Simon Dice. Maybe we'll get a few of everybody. But we'll be back tomorrow. No questions about it. Luis Barrios 9533 gets a comment in here before we wrap up the show. He says, guys, a ticket to go see Real Madrid versus Barca go for $10,000 each. What is wrong with people understanding free markets? You guys want to go to a game for this caliber for $100? Nuts. I don't know if Luis Barrios works for the team or not, but of the belief that this should be acceptable. I don't think it's necessarily just about price. I think it's also just about the ability to be able to sit in your seat. But anyway, well, I'll leave it for you guys to discuss further in the comment section amongst yourselves, in your WhatsApp groups, in your iMessage groups. Tomorrow when we return, I don't know what time tomorrow. I'll probably be around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier, but I'll let you guys know tomorrow on Twitter. Give us a follow, a subscribe, a share, a like, hit the bell, leave us a review, good, bad, positive, negative, todo lo que sea, lo que te nazca. We welcome all the feedback. It helps us out tremendously. So again, we will be back tomorrow with at least another co-host, if not more. That will do it for a special first Monday episode of Miami Total Football Radio. The show leading up to the MLS Cup Final should be a hell of a game between the two teams. A lot more to come this week as we get the schedule. I think the teams are getting into, well, Vancouver gets into town on Wednesday. There should be availability Thursday. Don Garber, I think, is going to speak Thursday night, which might conflict with our schedules here, but we'll figure it out. Friday's the World Cup draw. I know there's a lot of MLS events happening in Washington, D.C. Because of the draw. Normally there's a lot of parties in the host city of MLS Cup, but that might not be the case this year given that World Cup draw. But all the same, we'll provide you all the coverage throughout the week. We'll let you know what's going on, bring you all the news, all the analysis, all the opinions. So I am Franco Panizo. Thank you guys for tuning in on a short notice for the first of what should be 4 to 5 episodes. Stay tuned for the one in Español, in Spanish, later this week. But for now, that will do it for this first Miami Total Football Radio episode. I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.